Mouse Prince by Lisa Hurcum. I do not really mean that this story is true, but this is how it was told to me, and I'm just passing it on to you. There is a girl, still alive and well for all I know, that, like many girls, spent far too many hours on her phone. With her phone in her hand, the whole world was but a touch away, and she could not bear it to be any further. She slept with it on her pillow, laid it by her plate as she ate, and kept it in her pocket throughout each and every day. She loved that phone, oh yes, and could not bear to be parted from it. One day, the girl, her name was Rose, was standing waiting for a train on a busy platform. Her phone was in her right hand, all lit up with messages and notifications. Ping, ping. The platform was busy, and Rose was absorbed, and she did not notice the surge of people behind her until she was nudged and jostled, and oh, disaster! In her stumble, the phone was dropped onto the tracks. The train was coming closer and closer, and Rose knew she did not have the time to climb down and rescue it. Her precious phone would surely be crushed. Rose peered over the edge of the platform and said aloud, "I'd give anything to have my phone back. I'd give everything I own, I really would." As soon as she had said that, a small mouse, one of those that can be seen scurrying over and between the tracks, scrambled up to the platform edge and sat next to her feet. Its whiskers quivered, its ears twitched, and its horrid pink tail squirmed. From its toothy mouth, a tiny voice came. "I can help you," it squeaked. "You?" Rose shrieked. "How can a tiny thing like you do anything to help?" "I can get your phone for you if you promise I can live in your house and eat from your plate and sleep with you in your bed. You'd better be quick, mind. The train is nearly here." "Well, that's not much of a promise to make, a silly little mouse," Rose had laughed. "So I'll say yes." And straight away the mouse had darted back onto the tracks and popped up again with the phone clasped firmly in its tiny little claws. Rose was overjoyed. She snatched the phone just as the train arrived and was through its doors quick as a flash. That night, as Rose was eating dinner with her flatmates, there was a teensy-weensy knock on the door. She had opened the door, and there on the doormat had sat the mouse, twitching. Rose put her hand to her mouth and had made to shut the door, but one of her flatmates had followed her into the hall and stopped her. "What's all this?" she had asked. So Rose told her how she had dropped her phone on the tracks, and how the mouse had said he'd bring it back to her if she agreed to let him live in her house, eat from her plate, and sleep with her in her bed. "And did you agree?" the flatmate had asked. Rose had nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "But it's only a mouse." "Well," the flatmate had said, "a promise is a promise. You must ask your mouse into the house." Rose could see that her friend was right, so she beckoned the mouse into the living room, where it climbed onto the sofa where Rose had left her dinner plate. There they had sat, Rose, her flatmates, and the mouse, eating takeaway pizza on the sofa, the mouse taking little bites of the crumbs that Rose had pushed aside. At 11 o'clock, Rose had yawned and stood up. The mouse looked up at her and blinked its little pink eyes. "Oh," she shuddered. "Do I have to take it with me?" "A promise is a promise, even to a little mouse," the flatmate had reminded her. So Rose had picked up the mouse by its squirmy pink tail and carried him upstairs, the mouse dangling from her fingers. When she had woken the next morning, there was no sign of the mouse, and Rose had breathed a sigh of relief. That was that then, she had hoped. However, that evening, just as Rose was about to start dinner, there came the same teensy-weensy knock at the door, and there had sat the little mouse, squirmy tail, twitching whiskers, and all. "A promise is a promise," her flatmate had said. So once again Rose invited the mouse into the flat, and when she picked up her plate, he scrambled up and ate her food, and when she went to bed, he slept on her pillow. "How I hate mice," Rose had said. By morning the mouse had gone, but Rose knew he'd be back. And sure enough, the mouse had come back at the end of the day. This time Rose invited the mouse in, without a word, and offered her plate to him, which held a little pile of mouse-sized nibbles she had made ready. When she went to bed, she carried him by his tail, dangling him at arm's length, all the way to her room, where she plopped him onto her pillow. That night she dreamed of tunnels and tracks, twitchy whiskers and horrid pink tails that writhed and jerked in great big heaps. When she had woken, she was alarmed to see a strange man in her bedroom. The man was sitting on the side of her bed and watching her with eyes which blinked a touch too quickly. He shifted nervously from side to side and couldn't seem to keep his hands from twitching. "Who are you?" Rose had asked. "The mouse," he said. "The mouse prince, actually." He took her hand in his twitchy one and explained how he had been enchanted by a wicked old witch who had turned him into a mouse and then thrown him onto the railway tracks. "I watched you every day," the mouse prince said, "and I loved you. But you were a girl and I was a mouse. But then you let me into your house, and you let me eat from your plate and sleep on your bed, and you broke the spell because you kept your promise." "I like you better now that you are not a mouse," Rose had said, prepared to believe every word. And so Rose and the mouse prince got together, and perhaps they got married, or perhaps not, and Rose spent a little less time on her phone, but only a little.